2. Porto-Torres, Sassari, and the Sardinians.
The extreme mobility of the winds that prevail throughout the Mediterranean basin makes it one of the most dangerous seas in the world. It is common to see the 4 compass winds blowing in succession during a day's crossing. In comparative calm, we had passed the perilous passes of Bonifacio, and were about to sail along the Sardinian coast, when, at the exit of the mouths, the Italia, assailed by a powerful maestrale or northwest wind, began to execute a mad dance. Sparsely laden with goods, offered even more capture to the waves, which, in their frolic, threw it back at each other like a walnut shell. With each pitch, he had to hold on tightly to the edges of his bunk so as not to be thrown into the middle of the cabin. The furniture rolled over at once, the utensils and crockery clashed with a crash against the dressers. The noise of the waves laying down the steamer and throwing up their foam, which fell in rain even into the hatches, the sailors running on deck, which trembled under their feet, the tinkling of the ship's bell, the cries of the frightened women and children, all these sounds mingled in a savage concert, whose rumblings of the wind and the apparatus formed the basso continuo of a lugubrious, menacing harmony. This unpleasant moment did not last long. A semicircle of islands, known as the Asinara Islands, stretches out like a screen to the northwest of Sardinia. Scarcely had we passed the first of these islands, when we found ourselves sheltered from the wind in calm waters. At dawn we dropped anchor at Porto-Torres, in the middle of sailing ships, next to a steamer, the Piemonte, which was heating up, ready to leave for Civitavecchia. A quay lined with tall houses, poor and dilapidated, at the windows of which dry garlands of rags, marshes, a muddy stream, and here and there, among the reeds, ruins of Roman buildings, columns, the arches of an aqueduct, are what present themselves to our view. These remains are a reminder that an ancient and powerful maritime city rose where we now see only a miserable port. We landed, and a legion of starving porters, half naked, rushed to the baggage. After a visit to the Dogana, we run to a plank hut at the end of the quay, in front of which a railway train is preparing to leave for Sassari. This hut is the stazione of the Company della Ferrovia Reale Sardinian. I offered a 20-franc gold piece to pay for my second-class ticket, and immediately the employees crowded around the ticket office in astonishment. The receiver rings the coin 10 times on the tile to make sure it is in decent shape. This astonishment will be understood when we learn how rare coined money is in Italy. Paper alone circulates there, and at the counters of the companies one sees little but filthy notes and bronze coins. The peninsula and the islands are flooded with banknotes of all denominations, from 50 cents upwards. Not only do the National Bank and the state itself issue paper money, but there is no small town with a bank that does not also issue paper money. Thus, in Sardinia we see notes from the Sardinian Bank, the Agricultural Bank, the Bank of Cagliari, Sassari, etc. Do not dare to take these values with you outside the place of emission. In the neighboring town, they are no longer accepted. Hence a great embarrassment in transactions. For every 100 francs of gold or French securities, one receives today 110 francs of Italian paper. For a time, this figure amounted to 120 francs. French securities are sought after, and gold and silver specie flow back to our country. What little is left in the country is carefully hidden. Hence the undisguised satisfaction of the Italian who receives a gold coin in payment. The price of seat tickets is cheaper in Italy, for the same journey, than on our railways. On the other hand, there is no discount on luggage. It was in Sardinia that I first saw fourth-class passenger carriages. These cars are like our freight cars. We stand in it. A horizontal iron rod, which runs inside the vehicle, is the only way to keep its balance during impacts. A noisy, ragged population usually crammed into these uncomfortable cars. The distance between Porto-Torres and Sassari is only 20 kilometers. The line starts through a deserted and marshy region, climbs slopes, and approaches a plateau covered with cheerful orchards and olive groves. The vine lovingly embraces the trunks of elm and mulberry trees. Bouquets of orange, lemon, and pomegranate trees follow one another. Innumerable olive trees bend their grayish foliage to the south, which the maestro bends and shakes furiously. Soon the ruined walls and dusty suburbs of Sassari appear. The train gets off in the middle of a crowd of beggars who invade the tracks and crowd around us, uttering pitiful cries. Not a single omnibus. Followed by a facchino carrying my suitcase, I cross the fairground that separates the station from the city, where the wind kicks up the dust in long whirlwinds. We reach Corso Vittorio Emanuele, the main street of Sassari, lined with 2 rows of tall houses adorned with shops. The pavement, like that of all Italian cities, is formed of large granite slabs. Small flags fly above many of the refreshment bars where Vernaccia, or the country's new wine, is sold. A beautiful square adorned with the statue of Azzuni, a local illustration, occupies the center of Sassari. Official buildings, such as the town hall, the post office, and the provincial casa, line it with their vast facades. This square, crossed by the central street, under the name of Via Cavour, continues to the old Aragonese castle, which is falling into ruins. Beyond that, the suburbs begin again. Near the old castle, which has been converted into a barracks, is the Hotel Bertrand, run by a Frenchman who puts me in a room where 20 people could be accommodated. My closed window, in the shape of a mucharabi and lined with thick curtains, looks out on the Via Cavour, deserted and silent at the hour of noon, but which, an hour later, becomes crowded and buzzing again. Once I am settled, I travel around the city to examine the local physiognomies and costumes. The timing could not be better. I arrived, in fact, on a Sunday, and on that day the inhabitants of the countryside flocked to Sassari. The men are mounted on small horses full of ardor. Everyone wears the black woolen hat, long and pulled down over the nape of their necks. The end, stuffed with unknown objects, forms a large ball that twitches with each movement of the rider. They are dressed in a sleeveless black smock, short arms, and wide white canvas breeches, black gaiters reaching to the knees. Others are dressed in sheepskin turned upside down, with the wool inside, and tightened at the belt. This costume, which is very inconvenient in the heat, gives them a strange look. It is, it seems, a preservative against the fever that reigns over the whole extent of the island. The women are dressed in brightly colored fabrics. Their bodices are embroidered with silver or silks of various shades, with a pretty design. This bodice is open to the waist, and under the chemisette, reveals all shapes. The skirts are red or green for young girls, blue for married women. A capulet tied to the top of the head and falling over the shoulders, mostly black or blue, with yellow stripes, completes the costume, which is often of great price and worn only on Sundays or feast days. The Sardinians, all a small stature, are ugly and dirty. Their complexion is deep brown and their hair is ebony black. There is something African about their hard features. Arab blood runs through their veins. The Saracens possessed the island, and at various points the remains of their fortresses are still to be found. The language of most islanders is not Italian. The inhabitants of the cities use the national language alone. The Sardinian peasants use a harsh and guttural patois that partakes of Arabic and Spanish, the Aragonese having also subjected the island to their domination. The population of Sardinia therefore differs from that of the peninsula. Instead of the Italian mobility and manner, there is something serious, melancholy, striking about it at first sight. This melancholy, expressed by the Sardinian's attitude, persists even in his songs, which escape to a slow and monotonous rhythm from the vernaccia refreshment stands. One recognizes at once that one is in the presence of another race, that of the Iberians, which the Latins and Celts have almost destroyed, and which now exists only in the state of debris in the remote islands and in some parts of Spain, for example in the Basque valleys. Sardinia is the only country that still preserves monuments built by the Iberians in prehistoric times, long before the Romans or Carthaginians appeared on the island. These bizarre buildings, called nurrigues, they are huge towers with 2 or 3 floors, which curve into a vault at the top and flanked by smaller ones. They are formed of cyclopean blocks assembled without cement, and served as both dwellings and burials. These ruined constructions date back 30 centuries. What an abyss's time! Countless generations have passed, sowing the dust of their bones on the earth, our great ancestor, and these edifices are still standing, telling us of a history that men have forever forgotten.